Snow drifted across the road like pale threads unraveling from the hem of heaven, and in the middle of that quiet, unraveling world walked Mara Elarethan, trembling, and trying to drag a small wagon laden with firewood through powder that kept swallowing her boots. Her breath left her in soft clouds that vanished almost as soon as they rose, as if even the air refused to remember her. The leather of her gloves had cracked, her coat had lost its warmth long ago, and the heavy weight beneath her ribs, the growing child she protected with an instinct older than fear, pulled her forward with a strange blend of duty and despair. The cold morning light touched her face gently, but everything else around her answered with a cruelty she had grown accustomed to. She kept her eyes lowered as she passed the first storefronts of Willow Glen, not because she wished to be humble. She was simply tired of seeing her own story written in the squint and curl of other people's expressions. Doors opened just enough for people to peek out, gauging her progress the way they might watch a wounded animal staggering across a clearing. She did not stop. She did not let the shame slow her steps, but a small tremor in her jaw betrayed the deeper ache. Ida Mae Hargrove stood near the bakery window, arms crossed tightly over her shawl. Her voice carried on the breeze like the brittle snap of twigs. "Some women choose their storms," she muttered, making sure the words traveled farther than her kindness ever had. Mara pretended not to hear, though she felt the sting just behind her eyes. A woman with her history had little choice but to grow skilled at hearing what wasn't meant for her ears. She clutched the wagon handle with both hands, pulling harder when the wheels skidded over ice. Each breath grew sharper, and she pressed a palm to her belly as if whispering an apology to the small life inside. Her Sheriff Amos stood beside the post office, boot planted on the step, trying not to seem like he was watching. His gaze held something close to pity, but cowardice muffled it. He lifted his hat in a half-hearted greeting when she neared. "Cold spells hittin' harder than expected," he said, but the words were merely filler between his discomfort and his conscience. Mara nodded once and marched past him. He did not offer help. No one did. But the town was not the only witness to her struggle. Beyond the carpentry shop, a tall figure on horseback slowed his pace. Cole Thatcher reined in his sorrel gelding, gaze fixed on the brittle silhouette of a woman dragging more weight than winter should ever demand. The wind tugged at his coat, exposing the faded patch where his younger brother once tucked wildflowers as a joke. Cole's breath caught. Something in the angle of Mara's shoulders, how she leaned forward as if carrying. Memories heavier than firewood tugged at him in a place few things reached anymore. He dismounted quietly, boots crunching in the snow. The cold colored his cheeks, carving shadows around his eyes. And when he stepped forward, he did so with a carefulness learned from grief. Cole did not speak at first. The wagon wheel lodged itself into a rut of ice, jerking the handle from Mara's hands. She gasped softly, one arm instinctively wrapping around her belly. Before she could attempt to lift it again, a calloused hand appeared beside hers. "You're cumin' with me," he said, voice low but steady. "Storm'll swallow you whole if you keep on like this." His statement was not a request, though it carried no force beyond concern. Mara's spine stiffened with the instinct of someone who had learned to expect a price for every favor. "I can manage," she whispered, though her trembling fingers betrayed her. "I'm near home." Cole looked at her, not with pity, but with the quiet recognition of someone who had once carried his own suffering down this same road. "No one should have to manage like this," he said. "Not today." Another gust of wind barreled down the street, lifting snow and dusting Mara's coat in white. She swayed slightly, knees locking, as if bracing for more than the cold. Cole stepped forward and steadied her gently by the elbow. The moment his hand touched her sleeve, she flinched it from fear of him, but from fearing what kindness might unravel inside her. "I don't want trouble," she murmured. "And I ain't offering any," he replied. With a quiet strength, he lifted the wagon handle in one hand and motioned toward the outskirts of town. "My place is close. You'll warm up, eat something hot, rest a spell. That's it." Mara hesitated. She could already imagine Ida Mae's voice spreading the story through town by noon. A widow stepping into a bachelor's home would be twisted into something thornier before sundown. The child inside her seemed to sense her tension, shifting lightly beneath her ribs. She laid her palm over the movement. The decision came like a weary exhale. "All right," she whispered. Cole nodded once, an acknowledgement of the trust she had given him, fragile and unexpected. He began walking at a slow pace, the horse following behind, its breath rising in gentle fog. Mara walked beside him, careful steps, her gloved hands brushing against the warmth of the animal's flank whenever her balance faltered. Cole adjusted his stride to match hers without saying a word. They left the last of Willow Glen behind them, trading the mutters of the townsfolk for the soft crunch of snow and the rhythmic creak of the wagon wheels. The air smelled of pine and iron-cold wind. Mara's breaths began to steady, though every so often she glanced over her shoulder as if checking whether judgment followed like a shadow. Cole noticed but didn't comment. His ranch appeared through the curtain of falling snow modest, tucked beside a line of brittle cottonwoods. Smoke curled from its chimney in a lazy spiral, promising warmth that Mara hadn't felt in months. Cole lifted the wagon onto the porch, then opened the door for her. The warmth inside washed over her skin like a memory she had forgotten how to feel. "Sit by the fire," he told her softly. "I'll get something warm started." Mara stepped toward the fireplace, each movement cautious, as though afraid her presence might break the delicate quiet of the room. She lowered herself onto the small rug before the hearth, holding her hands close to the flickering orange glow. Her fingertips slowly thawed. Pain sharpened before easing into relief. Cole moved around the small kitchen with the steadiness of habit, striking a match, lighting the stove, warming broth. The soft sound of simmering filled the air. Mara watched the flames dance along the logs, letting herself breathe fully for the first time that day. Behind her, Cole set a bowl beside her knee. "Eat," he said. "Cold takes its toll quickest on those carrying more than themselves." She lifted the spoon, hesitating before taking the first sip. Heat bloomed across her tongue, spreading down her throat like mercy. She whispered a soft thank you, her voice breaking slightly on the second word. Cole didn't smile, but his gaze softened. He simply nodded and sat on the opposite side of the room, hands resting loosely between his knees, giving her space while still making it clear she wasn't alone. Outside, the snow fell heavier, blanketing the ranch in silent white. Inside, Mara's shoulders eased, her breaths deepened, and the trembling in her hands slowly quieted. The world beyond the walls might whisper about her, judge her, twist her story into something it was never meant to be, but here, in this small pocket of warmth, she felt the faint beginning of something she'd nearly forgotten. Existed safety, possibility, the fragile hope that tomorrow might not arrive with the same weight as today. And though she knew, the world outside would not forgive her easily, she also knew this moment, this warmth, this unexpected kindness, had opened a door she wasn't ready to close. The days that followed folded into one another with the quiet ease of drifting snow, each carrying its own subtle shift in the air between Mara and Cole. The morning after he brought her to the ranch, she rose early, thinking it improper to sleep in a stranger's home while he tended the chores alone. But when she stepped into the kitchen, Cole was already there, pouring coffee into 2 tin cups. He slid one toward the seat across from him without looking up, as though he had already counted her among the necessities of the day. That small, unspoken gesture settled into her like warmth spreading beneath cold skin. She sipped slowly, grateful for the heat more than the taste. Cole did not ask questions about her past, nor did he speak of his own loneliness. But the silence between them felt less like distance and more like a fragile understanding they were both learning to trust. After the last swallow, Mara gathered nerve enough to offer her hands to the work around the ranch sweeping. Tidying, organizing the pantry shelves, she suspected Cole had not opened in weeks. He accepted her help with a single nod, neither arguing nor implying obligation. It was the first time in months she had felt useful rather than pitied. The rhythm of their days grew steady. Cole spent long hours splitting wood or tending the livestock, his movements patient and purposeful. Mara watched him from the window sometimes, seeing how the wind tugged at his coat, how he paused occasionally with his hand braced against the fence as though remembering someone who once stood beside him. She never asked about that shadow in his gaze, just as he never asked about the father of the child she carried. Some wounds, she believed, were easier to heal when left unnamed. But the world outside Cole's ranch had not forgotten her. On a crisp afternoon, when the first light of dusk brushed the snow with soft lavender, Mara ventured onto the porch to shake out a blanket. She froze when she spotted Ida Mae trudging up the path, chin raised like she'd been elected sheriff of moral judgment. The woman didn't bother to hide her disapproval. "You've settled in quickly, haven't you?" Ida Mae said, eyeing the blanket, the porch. It's a faint glow of firelight behind Mara. "Some folks might say too quickly." Mara stiffened, clutching the fabric as if it could shield her. "I'm not looking for trouble," she murmured. "Trouble doesn't wait to be looked for," Ida Mae replied. "It grows in quiet places." She cast a pointed glance toward the door, then turned sharply and marched away, leaving her footprints like accusations pressed into the snow. Mara remained on the porch long after the gossip faded from sight. Shame curled hot beneath her ribs, sharper than the winter air. She whispered to her unborn child that she was truly trying to do right, though the world seemed determined to believe otherwise. When Cole returned from the barn, he found her still standing there, her breath shaking in small, uneven clouds. "She'll come to say her piece?" he asked, not unkindly. Mara pressed her lips together, unwilling to repeat Ida Mae's words. Cole set down his gloves and stepped beside her, looking out at the fading light. "Let folks talk," he said. "They need something to chew on through winter. Doesn't make it truth." His voice carried no anger, but the quiet steadiness of it reached deeper than pity ever had. Mara swallowed a tight knot in her throat. She wanted to believe that somewhere in this world her presence could be more than a burden. But believing had never come easy. That night, snow began to fall heavily, soft flakes thickening into a blinding curtain. The wind rose with a howl that made the walls tremble. Cole checked the lanterns twice, then stepped out to bring the goats into the sheltered lean-to. Mara followed him to the doorway despite his gentle warning to stay inside. She insisted she could help. He gave her a long look, worn, patient, uncertain whether to argue, but relented. The snow was deeper than she'd expected, swallowing her steps and biting at her cheeks. By the time they reached the pen, her breath came ragged. She leaned on the fence to steady herself, gripping the wood until her knuckles whitened. Cole noticed the falter in her stance and hurried to her side, catching her just as her knees gave way. "Easy, Mara. Easy now." His voice trembled with a fear he hardly understood. She tried to insist she was fine, but the words dissolved into a pained gasp. He scooped her into his arms without hesitation. Her head rested against his shoulder, and she could feel the thundering rhythm of his heart, turgent, frightened, human. Snow clung to his hair and lashes as he carried her back to the cabin, his breath sharp in the frigid air. Inside, he laid her gently near the fire, brushing melting flakes from her hair. She opened her mouth to speak, but a sudden tightness rippled through her abdomen, doubling her over. Cole froze. It took only a heartbeat for him to understand. The child was coming too early, too suddenly, and in the middle of a storm that closed the world around them in blinding white. "I'll get hot water," he said, though fear cracked the edges of his voice. He lit every lantern, drew blankets near, and knelt beside her as another wave of pain tore through her. She gripped his hand, her nails digging into his skin. For a moment, the fear in her eyes was not of birth, but a failing of being too weak, too tired, too unwanted by a world that had pushed her from place to place. "What if I can't do this?" she gasped, tears streaking her cheeks. Cole leaned close, his forehead nearly touching hers, his voice breaking open with something raw and unguarded. "You already have," he said. "Every step you took, every day you held on, you've been doing it. You're stronger than you think, Mara." Something inside her steadied. His words settled into the hollow places where hope had once lived. She braced herself, drew a shaking breath, and pushed through each wave that followed. Hours passed hard, breathless hours marked by sweat, pain, and the relentless storm raging outside. Cole stayed beside her through all of it, offering water, holding her hand, whispering quiet encouragement whenever fear tried to swallow her resolve. Near dawn, when the storm finally began to soften, a thin, piercing cry filled the cabin. Mara gasped, not from pain now, but from the overwhelming sound of life. Cole lifted the small, squirming newborn with trembling hands. He wrapped the child in his own flannel shirt, holding it as though it were something sacred. The baby's tiny fists waved weakly in the air, and for a moment, Cole's eyes burned with unshed tears. He laid the child into Mara's arms, and she pressed her lips to the warm, fragile forehead. Her shoulders shook with relief, exhaustion, and a swelling gratitude she couldn't yet voice. Cole knelt beside her, watching the two of them as if he had been granted a glimpse of something the world rarely allowed hope returning to someone who had nearly lost it. "You're safe," he murmured, though he wasn't entirely sure whether he said it to the child, the mother, or himself. A soft knock sounded later in the morning. Reverend Boone had fought through the lingering storm, concerned by the overnight silence. When he entered and saw Mara cradling the newborn, Cole keeping a protective arm near her, the Reverend's expression softened with quiet understanding. He spoke blessings over them not as rumor control, but as genuine warmth from a man who saw suffering as a seed that could still bloom. When he left, he paused long enough to look Cole in the eye and say, "Some kindness changes more than one life, son. It echoes." By midday, the cabin seemed brighter, though the sky remained pale and heavy. Mara sat in the rocking chair near the fire. The baby nestled against her chest, its breathing soft and steady. Cole knelt beside a half-built cradle he had fashioned overnight, rough edges smoothed, corners rounded with care. Every movement of his hands revealed a vow he didn't dare speak aloud. Mara watched him, seeing in the set of his shoulders a man who had carried his own silent winters, yet still found room to shelter hers. Their eyes met. No promise passed between them, no grand declaration, only a shared understanding that the storm had carved something new between them. Something fragile yet real. The wind outside quieted at last, and the snow settled like a blanket across the land. Inside the cabin, warmth shimmered along the walls, carrying the gentle certainty that this was no longer the place Mara had come to merely survive. It was a beginning unexpected, unspoken, and deeply earned. A new chapter waited just beyond the fading storm, and though neither of them knew where the path would lead, the air itself seemed to hum with the promise that they would not walk it alone.